Hello and welcome to World Universities Summit hosted by OP Jindal Global University. This is a session on redefining ways of knowing and doing research in the times of the pandemic. For this panel, we have distinguished set of speakers and they're also coming from diverse backgrounds. We have with us Professor Luke Georghiou, Deputy President and Deputy Vice Chancellor of the University of Manchester, United Kingdom. Professor Joshua Mokkaho, Vice President Lingnan, University, Hong Kong. Professor Dr. Michael Rosemann, Director, Centre for Future Enterprise, Queensland University of Technology, Australia. Professor Dr. Reem Sari, Vice President, Hebrew University of Jerusalem, Israel. And of course, I'm Anamika Srivastava, Associate Professor at OP Jindal Global University. When it comes to the importance of research in the university, one cannot overstate its importance, right from knowing about the deadly virus that affected the world and developing the formula of vaccine within a short period of time exemplifies what possibilities university research hold when it is well-funded, thoroughly supported, and favorably governed. In the same time, yet many universities across the globe were seriously challenged to carry on with their research activities. This was particularly relevant for social science research, research involving fieldwork, STEM research, lab work, closed-space human interaction, and other similar modalities. It was inevitable that universities and researchers would reinvent themselves. Digital and online methods have been the new normal as a disruption propelled institutions, students, and researchers to communicate through the digital means. Methodologies involving online research were deliberated, debated, and developed. While the ontological and epistemological nuances of doing online research remains, there have been episodes of speedy review, salami slicing of the research into several articles, possibly could be explained because of the performative pressure on the faculties and research scholars today in the university. Data shows unprecedented amount of papers were submitted to various journals in the last 1 year. Yet, not everyone has adjusted well. Gender, region, class remain important factors. Colleagues from the vulnerable population found it difficult to catch up. Not all early and mid-career researchers have found it easy to deliver in this period. Of course, with technology and overuse of the internet comes the dimensions of data protection, data security, and privacy. It is in this context, let's begin the panel discussion today. Professor Luke Georghiou, given your role as the chair of the European University Association Council for Doctoral Education, what would you say on the impact of the pandemic on the early career researchers?
Well, thank you very much, Anamika, and thank you for putting on this excellent summit. I am particularly concerned about the effects of the pandemic on people who are early in their careers, either as doctoral or as postdoctoral researchers. Like everyone else, they've taken part in our rapid adaptation to the online world, and in some ways they already had better skills to do this than many of their more experienced peers. But of course, they are losing things which others have accumulated over a long time, the kind of peer learning and exchange, the tacit acquisition of knowledge that takes place through face-to-face interaction. The effects have been very different according to discipline. Those who are dependent on remote access to scientific infrastructures, to particular libraries or research sites where they do their field work may well be more affected than others. And then at an individual level, of course, as you've just said, Chair, people have very different home circumstances for the digital world. And if they have caring or childcare responsibilities, or simply are living in an environment where digital work is not easy, they could be excluded. Of course, there are upsides in doing research online, and those who are dependent on interviews or contact perhaps have found it more easy to connect to senior people by arranging a Zoom call than they ever could have done in trying to fix up an interview. Nonetheless, we have found in the European University Association Council for Doctoral Education and in my own university at Manchester that there are the precarity of careers at that stage, already a problem in most of the academic world, has been increased. There's more concern about employment during the research, which some of them use to fund their work, and certainly about the prospects of employment at the end of it, when many institutions are under financial pressure. Of course, people can go with a new portfolio of skills that they've acquired during this period. I'd just like to conclude by mentioning the impacts on internationalization, especially given that we're speaking in a very international event. The idea of visiting doctoral and postdoctoral researchers has, of course, been greatly disrupted, both the system that supports it and the ability to travel and to host such researchers. We, of course, have done our best to maintain international partnerships, and in some cases we've mitigated the impact by sharing some resources for our doctoral researchers with partner universities. The communities that we have are important, of course, the conferences, the associations, and perhaps I would conclude there by saying, again, this has been very challenging for early career researchers, because those are the places at a critical point in your career that you build your networks, you build your social capital, catching perhaps the kind of people speaking at this conference in a quiet moment over coffee, and establishing yourself in their minds and learning some of those additional capabilities. So we are very challenged, and we need to know how to restore this to that generation of researchers. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Luke. I think the key takeaway that we found from your discussion was about the idea that how the early career and the faculty and the researchers are affected, and especially during their formative years, because that's sort of like, set the foundation. And it could be the institutional priority once we come out of the COVID situation to sort of help them. Let me come to Professor Michael Rosemann. Professor, allow me to come to you with this question about how can we build capacity among academic researchers who have been able to access the universities but have been locked within the ivory towers and are not able to communicate and engage with their immediate local community to do research? What can we do about this?
Yeah, Anamika, thank you so much also from my side to be on this panel, and also congratulations to the entire team organizing this wonderful global summit. I guess these are times where those who are comfortable with online and who are agile will succeed. No other industries have seen this. We've seen this in banking and health, where disruptions are coming. And I often felt the research sector has been very protected. We have practices, semester time frames, the way we conduct research. It hasn't changed too dramatically. Now, I think, as our previous speaker said, of course, there are tremendous challenges, but also tremendous opportunities. The question was around community engagement. And so I can say, well, you either join existing communities or you create your own community. You shape the future that you want. There are plenty of existing communities. And I think COVID has just amplified that those who are introverts are even more amplified to stay in the ivory tower. Now we encourage our young researchers in particular to join external communities wherever possible. In the past, that would mean they join their events. Now they join their online events, and the cost of participation are lower. So to join an existing community today is easier and faster than ever. And I fear that's often more a question of mindset than existing restrictions. And the second point I made was around creating your own community. Let me take you through one example. Our research is in the space of innovation. So what we created 18 months ago is a local community of innovation professionals. And the idea is we just have monthly meetings, and depending on the status, they happen physical, hybrid, or online. But it's a growing community where innovation directors and innovation researchers come together. And what we are working towards is continuous conversation. we don't know what industry demands, and industry often doesn't know what research has on offer. To overcome this mutual unconscious incompetence is what we try to foster here. So in summary, I said, join existing communities. And I think that's a mindset, and that's a task and opportunity far beyond COVID. But second, maybe even more important, as a researcher, try to create a community of practice that you could drive, where you, if you're an advanced academic, could showcase emerging PhD talent. But it's the ongoing conversation, the opportunity to create a first mover advantage, to be the very first who sees a research question in the making, that might give you the cutting edge. And I think community design and community engagement is something we really have to mature across all industries and all disciplines.
Thank you very much, Professor Michael Rosemann, for those comments. And I think the idea of, changing the mindset to reach out the community sort of existed before the pandemic as well. I mean, there are only specific or certain types of researchers who sort of go out to the community. Otherwise, we sort of remain within the ivory towers of the university space. With this, I would now like to come to Professor Joshua Mokaho. Professor, for you, we were thinking about like the issue of pandemic, that how it has sort of extremely disruptive for all professions. Travel restrictions have particularly affected those who conduct field-based research. Yet it has become more important in the middle of the pandemic to gather data at the community level across all regions of the world. Can the pandemic then redefine the ways of doing research? Can it redefine the ways of knowing and doing?
Okay, thank you for the organizer for putting a very important and international conference for us. And I'm delighted to join a very distinguished panel. So I think I agree with my colleagues just shared with us about the change of mindset, and also highlight about the difficult time that we are now facing. But learning from the human history, I think we've gone through so many difficult times, crises in the last decades also. I think this particular crisis has turned into great opportunities for us as academics work together beyond our ivory tower. Talking about the community, I think it's extremely important. I certainly agree with Michael when talking about we have to be more proactive in setting out our community of practice. But other than that, during the crisis time, universities in Hong Kong in general have been trying to move beyond our own box by working beyond the university sector, going along different sector. We are traditionally, people talk about a triple helix as a model governing about university, industry, and business collaboration. But certainly, with these particular crises we are confronting, we certainly move beyond the triple helix to multiple sector, including engaging the local community for redefining research topics, identifying research problems, because a lot of wisdom can draw and also come from the local community. Taking my university as one example, my team launched a campaign, we call it DSE. DSE is a Fighting COVID-19 campaign with three major DSE. D stands for discovery, S stands for service, E stands for education. Because we don't want to be trapped by only the crisis. As university leaders, I think we have to mobilize our student, faculty member, and all to refocus our attention on opportunity rather than only focusing on crisis alone. So through this DSE campaign, we actually engage our faculty and students together for working with the local community to identify real issues confronting them. And what are the major problems they face, and in what way we can work together and turn our research problem into some concrete services or actions which can support community development. And I think through education, we also make use of the opportunity for educating and also promoting public education to be more positive rather than only putting our emphasis on the crisis alone. Of course, don't misunderstand me that, I don't mind about the crisis. It's truly challenging. But we turn the crisis into great opportunity through this fighting COVID-19 pandemic campaign. And we found a lot of, energies and a lot of wisdom that I personally and my team have found from the local community. And a lot of issues being raised by them, very interesting. And also the way they come up with different solutions at local community would be really eye-opening for all, not only about doing pure research. I think it's kind of, evidence-based research would help academics to reflect upon the basic research as a research problems. So how to take these two things together, pure research and community-based research with evidence generating from the field will be very important. And my students and my team have actually learned a lot, because we are talking about not only research, but also turn research into policy solutions or local solution for supporting the community, and also bringing in donation or fund from different social donations in support of research and also community action for making sure we go through the difficult time together. I think the important thing is about together. And also we learn from this process about redefining partnership. Before the crisis time, most universities in Hong Kong certainly work across industry, business sector. But this time we found working with the local community or community at large would certainly widen our horizon and also enrich our experience about the definition of partnerships. I put in plural because this is extremely important platforms and we can engage the wider community, and organizing teams at that level would show the can-do spirit. The can-do spirit is so important. So most currently Hong Kong's local infection cases has gone down to 0 because of the local communities' awareness and working together hands in hands and in combating the crisis. I think this is very important. So I'll just stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Joshua, for those comments. The researcher in me was interested about your, how you sort of like modified the triple helix model, which to a multipole model, which is sort of like very interesting to bring in community, because industry, academia collaboration, or any sort of like industry involvement, it could be taken with a pinch of salt at the time of resource crunch right after the pandemic. So we do need multi-model approach here. With this, I would now like to come to Professor Reem Sari. Professor, for you, research partnerships among academic researchers, community members, and public health professionals are critical to manage pandemics like the one we are facing now. What are the possible roadblocks that we can experience in establishing successful research partnership, especially during the unforeseen crisis like the current one? Professor Sari.
Yes, thank you very much, Anamika, for this opportunity. Indeed, I connect strongly with what Joshua said about the opportunities that this crisis is giving us. Of course, there are many challenges and roadblocks to remove, as you asked, but there are also many opportunities. Our researchers feel that they have a better connection with the public. I think the pandemic have shown how much science is important for our future and for our everyday life. And therefore, the research that is being done at the university is becoming more relevant to the daily life of what is happening around us. And this both increases the awareness of the public to what is happening at the universities, but it also energizes the researchers that they feel that their research is more relevant and has more immediate outcome to the everyday life. So I think this has been very good. When trying to connect with the public health, we have done, I think, an amazing thing at our university. So it happened that our faculty of medicine is located in a hospital, and we basically donated our core facilities to the hospital and enabled an increase in the amount of screening that they could do in their hospital. So what happened is within a few days, a big fraction of the Faculty of Medicine volunteered in the hospital, and they conducted practically the screening of the coronavirus tests. And about 20% of all tests in Israel were done just at our university. We managed to develop new methods for screening. Basically, we implemented very early the pooling method that was then used worldwide to combine samples from different people into one tube, so that you can do that more efficiently. So I think the public health aspect of the operation of the university was really something that got stronger. We had a big boost in donations towards fighting COVID, but of course we managed to use this to increase and improve our facilities that will be used both to fight COVID immediately, but also to strengthen our abilities to do research in the future, maybe fighting the next pandemic to come. So I think if you manage to play it correctly between the immediate needs and the opportunities that this crisis is giving us, you can really come out of this pandemic, which I think in Israel we are starting to feel that we are coming out of it stronger than you entered it. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Sari. Thank you. And it was very interesting to note how your university donated facilities to the hospitals and the university volunteerism that happened, sort of like giving new dimensions to the whole idea of university social responsibility.
Right.
Amazing. Yes. With this, let me go back to Professor Luke and possibly Professor Luke. Given the lockdown situation in many countries, how researchers have been working in isolation, how do we restore the lost social capital for the generation of researchers who got affected?
I do believe there is a pent-up demand to do this, and I'm sure many of us experience it among our undergraduate students as well. People want to experience the things that they have been missing. I mean, my view is that as we adapt back into the world of face-to-face contact, we should particularly remember those who are not simply switching back in, meeting old friends and building their networks, but really work hard on new network building events and make sure that we prioritize these often younger, certainly less experienced generations to attend and get engaged in those events.
Thank you, Professor Luke, for those comments. Let me come to Professor Michael Rosemann. Professor, technology is something that we need to talk about. Let's just go back to the idea of how technology is sort of helping researchers during the time of the pandemic lockdown. What have been some of the benefits of the technology in driving research productivity, and possibly some of the downside of it?
So maybe let me talk about scale and speed as the two areas where I see impact. So scale means really, I now have a global audience. I've attended conferences where the number of participants have doubled. And these are long-established conferences. So all of a sudden, when I speak, I have a larger audience. And I think the impact of technology, the ease of taking part, the reduced costs of conferences, let alone the absence of travel, giving us a global audience. And that means there are potentially more readers, higher impact, more visibility. And the challenge that a lot of research has been hidden is addressed by using this. We, again, I think sometimes can be proactive. So, for example, it's not just technology, it's how you use it. We used something simple like LinkedIn, and it created an Australian-German research network that has now nearly 1,500 members. And it allows as a platform peer-to-peer conversation. So proactively building a platform for very open purpose, but it's something that's very, very important in these communities. The second item I'll talk about is speed. So we are going down to the point of creating 24-hour live research. If we now partner, in my case, being in Australia with partners in the US and in Europe, our research potentially never stops. And you could have seen, and not just for those who invented pharma, a lot of research has accelerated from mental health issues to new business models. There all of a sudden was an appetite to get access to papers very quickly. We now talk about factors like time to paper, where research efficiency is measured, and we don't ask ourselves how good is their paper, but how fast is this paper on that market in a time when people want to have answers. Now we see this activation of research partnerships in all sectors where 24-hour research, as opposed to 8-hour research, cuts speed, time to paper in thirds. And I think, again, as an opportunity, COVID and the move towards online research has created entirely ways of collaborative research that, in summary, have increased the scale and massively had impact on the speed in which we do research.
Thank you, Professor Rosemann, for those comments. Yeah, possibly using the existing platforms in a new way. The example of Lingnan is sort of like really exciting. Okay, so let me come to Professor Joshua Merk. Given your experience at the Lingnan University, what would you say on how can the knowledge gained during the pandemic, including new ways of knowing and doing research, can be sustained beyond the pandemic? Professor.
Well, I certainly agree with my colleagues that I see there are great potential and also opportunities coming out from these challenging times. But I would, before I get into your question, I want to just follow up what Professor Rosemann has mentioned. He highlighted about the positive side by making use of technology in informing research and innovation. But at the same time, because today we are so lucky because we are coming from countries or regions with sufficient preparation for the infrastructure. And we have very good support in terms of technology, so that we are not shying away from doing serious research and engaging ourselves with international partners for doing research. But having said that, I think we must be aware as a social scientists about the digital divide has become even worse during the pandemic time and also in the post-pandemic era. So in what way we are doing education and how different parts of the world could work together with the technology to enable those people from less fortunate environment would be able to engage or keep engaging with us. So this is one major challenge facing the world. And at the same time, I think doing research through technology is fun, but we have to look about the well-being, because more time being spent on the technology or the screen. And my recent research conducted asking about student feedback. The majority of students, they are fine with the online learning environment, but at the same time they found number one, fatigue of their eyes, health issues, discipline issues are becoming problematic if we stay on only online environment. So it's related to the question you posed to me, in what way we generate opportunity from this particular crisis. I certainly think that, as I mentioned about the campaign that my team has rolled out, DSE, Discovery, Service and Education, we make use of a donation from the local organization like Hong Kong Jockey Club Charity Trust has provided additional funding in support of community-based research. So it's open for all universities and also research institutions to work with the local community by co-defining research problems and generate a solution for supporting community-based issues. I think that sort of research can generate a lot of very good finding. I say one or two examples. we engage with the NGOs locally in Hong Kong by looking into in what way we can help the hygiene for the sublet units, because Hong Kong is so populated density is high, and in what way we can introduce some mature technology, we call it humanitarian technology, for preventing those sublet units citizens, they live better with the air quality during the very difficult time. And the evaluation of these sublet unit through our intervention generate some useful data, and those data could also be turned into publication. Another example is we also conducted a research with international community by looking into student well-being, especially focusing on international students. They were or have been overseas for learning, but they comment that many of the host institutions at the beginning of the crisis actually did not provide sufficient information or support for them. Many of them felt very lonely and vulnerable. We conducted this survey with the international community by looking into 26 countries students respond, looking into the well-being of international students. And those data are extremely useful, not only for publication, but also useful for institutions like ours to reflect upon the concerns of those international students when we are keen about internationalization, but whether institutions or university are well prepared and well resourced in supporting international students, especially for those university systems. They are heavily reliant on international students as the student number and resources. Then we have to think about what sort of appropriate measures or policies should come out in support of the student when they are during the difficult time. So these are my quick response to you. I think those data could keep on. We are actually applying for further grants to look into them, even a bigger project in the next few years from the Hong Kong government. I'm glad that the government in Hong Kong has not stopped investing in higher education by providing more research funding, including COVID-related funding sources, in order to engage the researcher for doing serious but meaningful research with impact, and impact with care research type, which can bring forth research generating not only publication alone, but also generate positive social and economic impact. So I just stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Joshua. Digital fatigue is a big issue, and also a related issue would be the research data collected through online, the authenticity of the data collected, and sort of like the quality of the data collected through online mode could also be questioned, and we need sort of better structures and frameworks to make that work. Professor Reem, Sari, related question regarding technology. What is your comment on the use of technology embedding in research, and especially let's talk about the idea of individual privacy, data privacy protection that comes with the internet or your usage of internet?
Yes, thank you. Indeed, using technology is changing the way we're doing science in many ways. You can just look at this session we're having now. Wouldn't have been so easy to have this session without everybody using Zoom so easily and so frequently, having such a large audience, and also bringing speakers from such a diverse set of countries to this session wouldn't have been so easy 2 years ago. We can also see that between the Israeli universities, Israel is a small country, but we have maybe 7 universities, major universities here, and each one has its own seminars and conferences and colloquia that they're doing. But now it became more easy to participate and have a pan-Israeli seminar in different subjects. And it so happens that I get to know my colleagues from other universities, which are just 1 hour travel away, that I wouldn't have seen in normal days. And now I see them in my seminars and they see me in their seminars. So it really changes the way we conduct the research. In a way, virtual travel became much more easy than the actual travel that we used to have before. The meetings are more global, and it's in a sense easier to travel without traveling. So I think this really changes the way things are being done. Now, indeed, the privacy issues are important. This session we're having now is recorded. Many of the Zoom meetings are recorded. Sometimes I see people are starting to say something, and then they say, "Oh, this meeting is recorded. Okay, let me let me change the way we're gonna say that." And you see that both in talks and also in even interactions that used to be just face-to-face interactions are now in Zoom, and many of them are recorded. There is also a lot of use of data because of the way we're conducting our research now, not only because of the pandemic, but because the world is evolving this way anyhow, and this just accelerated things. Personalized medicine is something that is collecting a lot of data with privacy issues. So this whole kind of data handling and the privacy is becoming more acute with the pandemic, just accelerating, I think, processes that would have been happening anyways. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Sari. Surveillance, monitoring, recording, sort of like becoming. That's true. But I think that's where the role of the institutional leader and leadership becomes very important, to communicate that, sort of like you're protected, it's a safe space, we sort of can voice our views. And yeah, I mean, that's something that's absolutely important. Now, the next round is pretty interesting. We have some live audience questions, and I've got several of them. We've got some time. I'll pose the first question, and if you want to jump in, it's up to you. You can chip in wherever you want, and let's see how it goes. The first question is, and I think it's a very relevant one: how should young authors deal with delays in review processes due to the pandemic? Anyone? Yes, Professor Luke.
Well, everyone has experienced the great frustration of the long time that the review process is taking. I'm not aware that the pandemic's made it worse. It was bad before, and it's bad now. I sympathize with editors who are finding it increasingly difficult to get people to do the reviews. They often have to make even 20 requests before they find somebody willing to referee some papers. So the whole publication system is under great stress at the moment, and we do perhaps have to have some kind of rethink about how we communicate and validate knowledge that gets beyond this.
So if you don't mind, I agree with Luke wholeheartedly. I think the system has its flaws. I wouldn't be surprised if future researchers and authors address those journals that are known for quick turnaround. I wouldn't be surprised if some established journals might suffer because a fast publication process might be more important than a long-lasting publication process that leads to one-touch higher journal. And so speed has entered as a criteria. Most industries, again, probably not the research sector. I wouldn't be surprised what you just mentioned might be the tipping point where speed starts to matter much more. And again, I think COVID has demonstrated that access to scientific data matters a lot, and we want this access fast.
And well, I just found, I agree with Michael about your observation, but I also found that some publishers, they are very proactive in making their material open access. And we see a lot of, these publishers move beyond traditional arrangement, become the winner because the download rate is so high, and it certainly affect the impact factor and also the ranking of journal. But I hate to say that, but it becomes something very sensational for young scholars. They look for, journal with impact factor and citation is high. So it all depends on how publishers they want to turn around. It's a challenge and also crisis, but at the same time, for some publishers, if they are moving beyond their own old way of doing things, can also redefine the domain by attracting more and more special issues. I found the special issue with more focused submissions of thematic topics are having a lot of downloads, especially related to COVID-related matters.
Yes, Professor Joshua. Thanks for those.
I find it interesting that the publication system is still acting in the traditional way that it acted in the last few decades. And I wonder how long is it going to still stay this way, and how quickly are we going to move to a system with a different kind of peer review than what we currently have.
We have the next question, again, an interesting one. How are we supposed to erase the tag of COVID batch from the work of students in the future? Possibly thinking about, I'm thinking about the researchers, PhD students who are submitting their PhD in 2020, 2021. Do you think there would be a sort of a stigma behind these students, these scholars, or do you think it's something that, you know, sort of will go away, fade away with time? Professor, I'll start with Professor Luke.
Well, I was already talking about that we've had a generation that has been particularly affected. I think it is really important in appointment, probation, promotion decisions that we take full account of the impacts people have had. That, of course, is a general statement, but the problem is people have not all had the same impact. So to try to get some insight on what might be differential factors, just as we've become used to taking account of interruptions to work for maternity leave or other reasons. So it's very important that we become aware of this. It is something that will fade over time, like most of the effects of the pandemic, but we'll also be left, as we've been discussing in almost every question, with some permanent changes, and we need to be sensitive to those.
Professor Rosemann, do you have your comments?
So those who study under constraints have to demonstrate resilience. That might become a competitive advantage. I think when times are great, then you have to be even more competitive, even more resilient. So you might flip this around, and some people might say frugal but credible research, because your PhD is still assessed based on the same criteria. Just the way you got there was harder. So I admire for the rest of my life everyone who will be able, under very frugal conditions, to conduct a world-class PhD. And that might, as I say, it might be a good advantage.
Professor Joshua Moka?
Well, I think it's to do with our management of PhD students in particular, and in what way universities should take a more proactive approach in responding to the challenging times by allowing flexibility in terms of the study period, and also offer more mentoring support, especially for those students doing their PhD during that period, will certainly have a very high level of anxiety or loneliness, because they may feel more vulnerable. So we have to revisit about the policy guidelines in governing about the PhD programs, but at the same time offer support and mentoring during a difficult time. Mentoring is not only about academic advising, but more importantly, I think it's about counseling, well-being support is extremely important during the difficult time. Having said that, I think it requires resources, because faculty members, they are also under stress. But in what way we can develop a better support system would be very important. I don't want to give a stigma only for the student, because for faculty members, they are also under pressure for producing high quality output, especially for substantiation or promotion. And they need, everyone has some kind of critical point. The university management should think about in what way we can support our people, because people are the core, asset to universities.
Professor Sari.
So I agree that PhD students are facing lots of challenges now, and we have to make sure that their well-being is fine, and that the opportunities they're facing are similar to normal days. But if you ask about whether their PhDs will have a long-lasting stigma, my guess, well, we'll have to see, but my guess is no. My guess is that you know, the community and the scientific environment has a short memory for such things. And in 15 years, you're not going to look back and say, oh, Professor this and that, you had your PhD in 2021. So I think it will fade. If a student is resilient enough to pass the difficulties that he is facing now, he will be fine in a few years, and nobody will say, you had your PhD in a bad time and therefore you're inadequate to do this or that. So I think it will be fine.
Thank you, Professor Sari, for that. And hopefully, so this was a good question, because sort of it, I mean, the way the discussion sort of panned out, it turned the table that it's possibly a good year to showcase that you've been able to pull out a good show. And, you know, so I think that's something very interesting. Maybe we can take one more question. We've got time for one more question. And it's about the early career faculty members. And because the distinguished panelists that we have today hold positions of, you know, leadership in your university, maybe we can have one round of quick intervention on what has been maybe like one initiative that you would like to highlight that you've taken in the past 1.5 years in your university that has been the key game changer, or let's say one of the most important step when it comes to supporting the early career researchers. We'll start with Professor Luke.
Well, it's difficult to pull out one particular initiative, as there are several different ones going on. I think all I can say is that we have been highly sensitive to the challenges that they face and have really done our best to keep them integrated and part of the community. Probably, I mean, if we ask them, I think the most important thing is that we have, first of all, lobbied very hard with the people who are funding them externally to make sure that they have had as many and as good extensions as possible to take account for the period when they could not get access to laboratories and so on. And then wherever possible, we have tried to pick up those who were excluded by the more generous funders doing this and support them ourselves. So I think that was probably the most important.
Professor Rosemann.
So my colleague Joshua talked early on about togetherness. What we have done is we try to incubate individual projects. Academic freedom often means you can work on whatever you want. What we try to encourage now, that we only work on shared research questions. We created 4 so-called signature projects, each of them 8 to 10 members with a shared research question. And I felt it was much easier for a cohort of researchers to work on one big question. So in the old days, I could ask individual researchers, ECRs and established researchers, what are you working on? And they would talk about at least 3 projects. Now I want that 3 researchers say, I work on the same. No. And we want to flip that relationship from one person working on 3 projects, 3 people work on 1 project. And this has helped to bring togetherness into the daily life of a researcher.
Professor.
Okay, just like other university different scheme, but I just highlight one during the crisis. We launched a kind of campaign, CC for You, closely connected for you, not only about the early career researcher, but also the PhD student together with 4 C. Number 1, the first C is connecting our young scholar and student to the international research and learning community through online platform, and the university investing for doing so. The second C is connecting student and also faculty member, young scholar, to conduct research and reach out to the local society and beyond. Another C is connecting them to co-developing a productive research environment and career development, because the PhD student, upon their graduation, they are very concerned about the market. So we are linking them to career development and also last C is caring student well-being. So we are talking about 4C with a CC for you. It's closely connected for you camping among young scholars and also PhD students as one of the signature program, if you like, at my university.
Professor Joshua, yes, Professor Sari.
Thank you. So for early career, I think we have been in generally just more flexible because we understand that there are some challenges. We're not always understanding exactly what they are, and they are different for different young faculty members. So we are more flexible in several ways. One, for example, is more flexibility with the usage of funds, startup money, because we understand that the needs may be different than what we thought in the beginning. So we're giving them more flexibility. And some of the timetables are more relaxed because we understand that some things are taking longer or conducted in a different way. For example, the period for tenure, we might be more relaxed about it, definitely adding another year or things of this sort.
Thank you, Professor Sari. So amazing. Finally, we talked about funding. I think it was very important. So startup funding, money, it has been a wonderful panel. We do have some time left, but I don't think we can take another question or a round. But possibly one, quick final comment from each of you, and then I'll sort of like wrap up. Yes. So we'll start with Professor Luke.
I believe that all of our discussion has shown that we've been through a time which has changed the world in a defining way, just as people in the past would talk about themselves as a post-war generation or something like this. We will be talking about a post-COVID generation, and the important thing is not to be looking backwards, but to be looking forwards and have a vision of what we can do to use these experiences in the most positive way. And there's a rather tired phrase now, build back better, but more importantly, build back different and better, I think.
Professor Rosemann.
Yeah, so we can't change our environment. We only can change the way we deal with it. So the world will see more challenges, more crises, more disruptive changes. So again, being agile, being efficient is something important. I just feel often in research, we focus on outputs, on the funding we recruited, the PhD we supervised, the papers we published. We focus less on the process, the efficiency, the agility, the resilience. I guess future research training will focus on those soft skill, mindset skills that are crucial. And hopefully we go beyond sheer training of technical research skills to those skills that mattered most in this time. And I hope this will for the rest of the research training that we see in our future have massive impact.
Professor Joshua.
Okay, I think the whole crisis is really a humbling experience for many leaders in universities around the world. So I want to conclude by 2C. I think this humbling experience brings forth about the importance about first collaboration, and then second is cooperation. So we need to cooperate and collaborate because the issues have become so complex, which require comparative and international perspectives in resolving the issue confronting us. Thank you.
Professor Sari.
Yes, so I think indeed a humbling experience, but humbling and also energizing. And I think it highlighted the importance of science, and I think that will stay with us for a while. And I hope we can get the better out of this crisis and grow up stronger. And I would like to thank you for this session and the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, each one of you. It has been a phenomenal discussion. I would like to highlight some of the points that I've noted down. A lot of things here on my notebook. So, what does research in pandemic means? What are the dimensions? We need to be sensitive, empathetic, sort of explore new platforms, reach out to the community. We need to look forward, but not forget the history. We need to sort of focus on agility, flexibility, open access resources, open access journals. We need to be humble at the same time. It is a phenomenal situation. We need to be energetic. And the last thing I would like to quote Professor Rosemann when you said, those facing constraints need to demonstrate resilience. And this is the time that we need to demonstrate resilience for the future researchers, for those who are in their formative years of their career. We need to and they need to demonstrate resilience. Institutions need to demonstrate resilience, and leadership needs to demonstrate resilience. With that thought, I would like to thank everybody. Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor Luke. Thank you, Professor Rosemann, Professor Joshua, and Professor Sari. It has been a wonderful session, and I would now like to end the session. Thank you.
Thank you.